welcome to the second War Films podcast. With the War Films podcast, we're looking at 10 different war films. This follows on from our Adventure Films podcast, where we looked at 10 classic adventure films. My name's Garen Ewing. I'm a comic artist and writer and illustrator, and I'm doing this podcast with my brother, Murray Ewing.
Hello, I'm Murray. I'm a writer. I do music as well. I have a blog called Musings, which you'll find linked to on the podcast page.
And we should say that this podcast includes spoilers. All our podcasts include spoilers because we discuss the film in some detail. We're not expert film historians, nor are we war historians. Yeah. So please excuse our ignorance on various matters. And I think especially with this film, we're looking at Platoon, Oliver Stone's 1986 film about Vietnam. And Vietnam is something that I know very little about. Not that I'm an expert on any war, but World War II is kind of something I grew up totally immersed in. Comics, films, books, playing it, making models, playing with toy soldiers was all World War II stuff. Vietnam came later.
Yeah, and of course it's both of us, as you can tell, are Brits, and of course Vietnam is an American war.
We refused to intervene. I think the British were asked, but
well, actually, I say it's an American war, but of course it was something I've read pointed out is that the Hollywood version is you do get a lot of Americans in Vietnam, but of course there was the Vietnamese, the South Vietnamese fighting the North Vietnamese. Australians and French both had
yes, well, it
large
was French,
numbers over there.
French Indochina, wasn't it? And that's where it all came from. And in fact, the Americans supported the South Vietnamese for a long time before they actually got involved.
Yeah, in fact, it's a very long, drawn-out conflict. I think if you look at the actual dates, I can't remember what they are.
20 years or something.
Yeah.
In fact, I think Ho Chi Minh, the North Vietnamese leader, said, I'm going to paraphrase here, something like, if the Americans want to make war, we'll make war for 20 years, but if they want to make peace, we'll invite them round for a cup of tea or something.
Of course, though, this, in contrast to the film we covered last episode, which was The Guns of Navarone, which was very much a mission-driven story, it was all about a crucial point in a conflict. This is much more about a personal view of what it means to be a foot soldier in a platoon fighting in a war. Yeah. So it's less about like a decisive turning point. It's more about the daily grind and the horrors of war from a personal point of view. In
fact, watching Platoon, I almost felt guilty about watching and enjoying The Guns of Navarone because that's such a fairly a relatively frivolous adventure entertainment. And then you watch something like Platoon, and suddenly you're seeing people's arms being ripped off. In Navarone, someone will be shot and they'll just go and fall over, and there'll be hundreds of them. It's just a German falling off a cliff, another German falling off a cliff. With this, it was much more the horror of war, and suddenly the tone changes, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was a very heroic story, and it's right to talk about heroes in war, but also you've got to have the other side of it, which is the horrors of it, and
Vietnam is something. There was actually a war going on when we were both alive, of course, because it ended in 1975, although I think the US withdrew in 73, I think.
Yeah.
And my introduction to Vietnam, well, maybe I saw a film, I can't remember, but actually it was a film that made me more aware of the political aspect of Vietnam, which was Woodstock.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which was quite an important film in my own history, because that introduced me to a lot of the kind of music I like.
Yeah.
So a lot of that late 60s music, which I really love. The classic gigs of that time were very much also counterculture events that included a lot of anti-war sentiment and songs, in fact. So Platoon was made in 1986 and is one of Oliver Stone's early films.
In fact, it was a film. Platoon is based very much on Oliver Stone's personal experience of Vietnam.
Right.
In fact, the character of Chris Taylor, played by Charlie Sheen,
who's the main character.
Yeah, in Oliver Stone's commentary, quite often talks about him as I. So that's basically him.
Right.
A lot of it seems to be quite autobiographical. Like Oliver Stone, like Charlie Sheen's character, volunteered to go to Vietnam.
Yes.
Dropped out of college and volunteered. He turned up on his 21st birthday.
And so the film takes place in 1967, I think, doesn't it? The end of 1967.
Starts in 67, yeah. It goes to, like, this one, New Year's Day, 1968, one of the captions is. So. Because
American soldiers, I don't know if this was across the board, but most of them served for 1 year.
Yes.
And throughout the film we get quite a few soldiers referring to how many days they've got left.
Yeah.
And Charlie Sheen's character, Chris Taylor, at one point says, I've still got 332 left or something. And there's a couple of characters later. There's a character who's got 3 days left.
Yeah.
And he actually asks the sergeant if he can, can I go now? Because I've got a bad feeling.
Yeah, they're just about to go into a major conflict at that point, and he thinks, can I go now?
Yes.
But of course, another rule is if you get shot twice, I think which is what happens at the end of the film.
Right. If you get wounded twice.
Wounded twice.
If you get shot twice, you might be dead. Then you're out, I suppose.
Yes.
And that happens to Chris Taylor, doesn't it?
That's how he ends.
So he doesn't do his full year. Did that happen to Oliver Stone? Do you know? Was he wounded? Or?
I'm not sure actually. I don't know. A lot of it is based.
Oh, I've just seen in my notes. He was wounded twice.
Though it does say in the film that Sergeant Barnes has been shot 7 times. So
yes, that's Tom Berenger. He's got a massive scar down the side of his face and is a bit of a psycho, perhaps. Just about, do you know anything about the origins of the film? Because I did read that this was a script he wrote very early on.
Yes. And
then tried to get made in his early years of trying to get into films. It didn't quite happen.
Yeah, he wrote it. Yeah, I think it was pretty much. I think he said he wrote it in the 1970s, very early. And first he went around Hollywood saying, "I've got this film about Vietnam," and they said no one wants to see a film about Vietnam. Then there was The Deer Hunter and Apocalypse Now, which were immensely successful, both critically and in terms of box office.
Right, that was 1978 and 79.
Yeah.
So post Vietnam War.
Yeah. And so then Hollywood executives said, well, we think the Vietnam film has reached its high point with those 2 films, so there's no point in doing another film about Vietnam. It's like he had the complete, polarised thing. No one wants to see about Vietnam.
In 1968, there was a film made by John Wayne.
The Green Berets.
The Green Berets, and he made that almost as a reaction to the anti-war sentiment.
Right, yeah.
Was it Charlie Chaplin said something about when he was accused of being a communist? He said, "I'm about as communist as John Wayne's right foot," or something like that, because John Wayne was very much I don't want to use the phrase right wing, but certainly of that high conservative and quite hawkish.
Yeah,
as perhaps you'd expect John Wayne, although sometimes you're surprised by the real lives of the actors. But anyway, he was very patriotic, very hawkish, and he actually initiated the project of the Green Berets. He was a co-director. He wanted it made, and it was very much propaganda for the war, which was in full swing. In fact, it was released in 1968, the time when Platoon actually happens. And I think Oliver Stone wanted to make a film that reacted against that. Of course,
showed the reality of it, because that was apparently I haven't seen it, but it's a very heroic version.
Yeah, I've only seen the poster, and it's got that Guns of Navarone vibe.
Yeah,
that I think this elite squad goes into Vietnam and whatever. I don't know, so I better not talk about it really. But there were let's just talk about some of the other Vietnam films, because most of the ones I've seen are like Platoon. There's The Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now, which I think you know a bit more about.
It's one of my favourite films.
Right.
Yeah.
Was that based on Heart of Darkness?
Yes.
Conrad's?
Yeah.
Is it an adaptation of it, or is it?
The basic storyline is very much the same. Because
obviously, Heart of Darkness wasn't about Vietnam.
Yeah, that was set in the Belgian Congo.
Right.
And it was basically about how the Europeans had gone over to the Congo and exploiting the country, and one of them had found that the best way to exploit the country was to pretty much set himself up as a local god to a tribe.
So it's quite like Tintin in the Congo then.
Could be. But in Apocalypse Now, you've got a sort of super soldier who basically sets up himself in Cambodia rather than Vietnam, and sets himself up as a sort of local god to Vietnamese or Cambodian troops, and is winning the war in his own way.
And another one which came out a year after Platoon was Full Metal Jacket, which was Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
And when coming up with the 10 films, I wasn't sure whether to go for Full Metal Jacket or Platoon. I went for Platoon because I remember it making more of an impression on me than Full Metal Jacket, although I enjoyed that as well.
Yeah.
But also, we've got another Stanley Kubrick film in the 10, which is Paths of Glory. So that's kind of why I went for Platoon. Good Morning Vietnam.
Yes.
Also 1987. That was a very popular film, but it was a bit more feel-good overall. Maybe not feel-good's not the right word, but certainly more entertaining. It did have its war is hell side, of course. It was still, that was the vibe of it, with Robin Williams, and also Forrest Whitaker was in it.
Oh, was he? Yeah,
who is in Platoon as well.
Yes.
Born on the 4th of July, which was Oliver Stone's second in his sort of Vietnam trilogy.
Yes, yeah.
Have you seen that one?
I think I might have.
Tom Cruise.
I don't remember it much, as a vet, a Vietnam vet.
Yeah, it's based on the autobiography of Ron Kovic. And I've seen that a couple of times, but I get it mixed up with another film I've seen a couple of times, which is Forrest Gump. And I was thinking about this. I thought, why do I? And the reason is because Born on the 4th of July has Tom Cruise most of the time in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And quite an angry sort of Vietnam vet. And in Forrest Gump, although he's not in a wheelchair, Tom Hanks, they're both Tom as well. It makes it very confusing. He looks after his unit commander, who's
very embittered.
Yeah, and in a wheelchair. Yeah. And so I get those mixed up.
Oh, yes.
And another one was Jacob's Ladder.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a favourite film of mine. Although that's difficult to think of as a Vietnam.
Because most of it's after Vietnam. Is that right? It starts in Vietnam.
Yeah, it's one of those, technically, it all takes place in a... Oh, I'm not going to spoil...
We won't spoil that one. We're going to spoil Platoon.
It does begin,
well, we're not going to spoil it. We're going to spoiler Platoon.
I mean, it's interesting that a lot of the films about Vietnam, which we're thinking of as, like Rambo as well, are about the,
I've never seen
the
that.
after effects.
Have you seen Rambo?
I don't think so, no. But they're about the after effects of Vietnam. They're about the veterans, the deer hunter, for instance.
I mean, it could be said that...
And Taxi Driver as well.
Oh, right, yes. All Vietnam films are the Americans trying to work out, because, of course, they lost the war. In effect, didn't they? They withdrew.
Certainly, there was no decisive win. It wasn't a clean war.
No, although the communists ended up with Vietnam a couple of years after the Americans withdrew. So, okay, so that's the kind of scene of Vietnam films, directed by Oliver Stone. Now, we said he made a kind of trilogy, with Platoon being the first, Born on the 4th of July being the second, and the third one was, which I haven't seen, was called Heaven and Earth.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
1993, and that was based on the autobiography of Lee Lai Hayslip, who was a Vietnamese villager, a woman who eventually, I think, married an American serviceman and went to the States and then returned.
Yeah.
So that actually sounds very interesting. Oliver Stone, of course, made a lot of other big films: Wall Street, The Doors, JFK, Natural Born Killers, and Nixon. Yeah. It's interesting having JFK and Nixon.
Yeah.
It was Nixon, I think, who put the troops into... it was Lyndon B. Johnson who actually who escalated the ground war, or began the actual... There were US troops already in Vietnam, but it was Johnson who actually started the ground war, as it was. Yeah, Nixon took office in 1968, so that was the year after the second year of Platoon. Are you an Oliver Stone fan?
No, I've never really... I mean, I've seen films of his like Natural Born Killers... when they came out in the cinema. Yeah. And The Doors as well. I've never really sort of got the measure of him. He also did a TV series in the Wild Palms.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which I think was about virtual reality.
Right.
But yeah, I've never really sort of... Some directors, what they stand for. I'm not so sure with them.
I've always had the impression of Oliver Stone, perhaps because he made JFK, that he was a bit of a conspiracy
theorist. That's something I've got as well.
But he did make a documentary on... not a documentary, a film on 9/11. And I think he didn't go for the sort of truther, thankfully. So maybe he might not be. Now, what was the other one? Well, he did a film about George Bush, actually, was it just called W? I never saw it, but so American presidents seem to be...
Was it a comedy?
But he's a very, very liberal director, so he does have a lot of good through that, but perhaps sometimes leans a bit heavily into the conspiracy theory stuff. But I might be wrong about that.
In a way, you can't blame him, because the whole Vietnam experience, and then coming back into the Nixon Watergate experience,
Yeah.
and of course the death of JFK. It was a whole. I mean, the tagline of this film is something about the loss of innocence, isn't it?
Right.
And you could say that it's not just Vietnam, but politically at home, America had this huge loss of innocence experience.
Yes, and I believe actually one of Johnson's things with the Vietnam War was that they weren't very open and honest, as a lot of governments aren't during an actual war. It's more about propaganda and just saying the good bits. But I think it was kind of obvious to the American public that that's not what was going on, and so he lost the distrust. But going back to the conspiracy theory thing, I know the Gulf of Tonkin incident, cited by a lot of conspiracy theorists as a false flag event, which I think it's been pretty much disproved that that's the case since then. But of course, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you wouldn't believe that because it's all a cover-up. Anyway, should we get on to the actual film? I'll just a little interesting tidbit about the production company, which was Hemdale Film Corporation.
Yeah.
And they started out as a talent agency who helped launch Black Sabbath and Yes.
Right, good for them.
And in fact, they released about 9 films in 1986. So they, although they went bankrupt, I think, a few years later, not because of these films, as far as I know, but they said the late 80s they produced a lot of films. So the film opens with
the arrival in Vietnam.
Yes. Of cherries, as I think they referred to later.
Yeah, this is something Oliver Stone says was part of his experience, is you go over there and immediately you find that you're not being treated with kid gloves at all. As a new person, you're in fact you're shoved in a platoon and they don't really care about you.
Yeah.
You expect to be sort of introduced a bit to the world, but no, they don't care. They're just interested in getting there 365 days done. And if you haven't been there surviving for a while, in a way that makes you less valuable.
Because you haven't earned respect, or you...
Yeah, you don't know the ropes, as it were. Yeah. I mean, in a scene shortly afterwards, we find Charlie Sheen's character on point, which means he's right in front of all the rest of the platoon walking. And that happened a lot to the newbies.
Yes.
In a way, because they were more expendable.
Yes.
I mean, this is an extremely cynical view of it.
But I can understand that,
Because they don't know the ropes, they're less valuable to the whole platoon.
Yes, yeah. And I guess also there's no relationship there yet. And you probably didn't want to.
Yeah, you don't know if you can trust you need to be able to trust your fellow platoon soldiers in that sort of situation.
I guess because soldiers were only there for a year, in general, you didn't get many experienced people there. Yeah. And so that actually wasn't very good for having experienced troops. I mean, I know in my area of speciality as far as military matters is concerned is the Second Afghan War, and it was the troops who had been in India a long time who were the best troops. Ones who had just come over from England, quite often, especially for the Afghan War, so they needed new recruits, were quite weak. They'd suddenly be hit by all the diseases that India could throw at them, whereas the others had been hardened both to the weather and the diseases, and this must have been the same.
Of course, the first thing that happens here is they've just got off the plane and they see what's outgoing, which is body bags.
Yes.
Now, it's later you see wind blow the body bags off. Yeah, in fact, the military advisor who did a commentary to the DVD and who plays a captain later on.
Telephone man, as I thought of him, because he's always on the phone.
Oh, right, yeah. He was in one of the body bags. He says there's no way to make it... there's only one way to make a body look like a body, and that's to have a body.
That's Dale Dye.
Yes,
he's quite interesting because he was in 31 combat missions in Vietnam and 4 Purple Hearts, and he founded something called Warriors Inc., which specialised in training actors for realistic military portrayals.
Yeah.
And Platoon was one of his early... projects, and of course he was actually in it, and he went on to do the novelisation of Platoon.
Oh, did he?
He was an author as well.
Yeah.
So he was well in there.
Listening to his commentary is very interesting. Both he and Oliver Stone do separate commentaries on the DVD I had.
Right.
And he's...
Can I just say, all I had was interactive menus, which I was quite excited about, and a trailer, which I decided to save for a special occasion.
He's obviously very knowledgeable. I mean, he was the advisor on all the... They said in this film they made a lot of effort to get all the details right, even down to like the design of the latrine, for instance.
Right, yeah. Yes.
But both his and Oliver Stone's commentaries are really interesting in different ways.
I imagine, yeah. Okay, so yes, as Charlie Sheen comes off the plane, he's very clean, young-looking, fresh, and as well as the dead bodies, which are being treated with... these are not in coffins draped with the American flag.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
They're being grabbed by soldiers and swung onto the next thing to be put on the planes and shipped. These are just bags of meat, really, to put it crudely. But there's a great bit where a soldier walks by who's blackened as if he's, with dirt, and I mean he looks like a zombie.
Yes.
And the look he gives Charlie Sheen and the look Charlie Sheen gives him is a great
incoming
start.
And outgoing.
Yeah.
He looks like this is the transformation.
And of course Charlie Sheen looks pretty much like that by the end of the film, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Just another point about, of course, Charlie Sheen, the son of Martin Sheen, who was in Apocalypse Now. Yeah,
in fact, Charlie Sheen was in Cambodia where they filmed Apocalypse Now with his father.
Oh, right.
As a young kid.
And this was way before Charlie Sheen went slightly doolally
did he?
with his winning or whatever. I've only seen internet memes about that. I haven't seen the original stuff.
Interestingly, Oliver Stone wanted Emilio Estevez first.
His brother.
Yes.
Yeah. Because Sheen is not their original. Estevez is their family name, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, is it? Oh, right.
Yeah. Okay, so... Yes, and we're pretty quickly into the jungle.
Yes, with this is where we, of course, get to see how the newbies don't know anything. Yeah. They carry too much equipment.
He's got books and things in his bag, isn't he?
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I went on a cub camp, and my bag was about 3 times bigger than everyone else's. And when we did inventory, I saw why, because they all had the essentials. And I brought books, comics, and my 1 foot tall Darth Vader doll.
which might have proved useful.
That would be me in Vietnam. You're carrying too much. What's Darth Vader doing? Who is Darth Vader? Yeah. Yes, we see... I mean, I don't think I survived in the jungle because we very quickly see snakes. I don't think I'm too bad, although I haven't had much personal interaction with snakes. But spiders, I wouldn't be too pleased about. And especially he ends up with ants crawling underneath his uniform.
Apparently getting bitten, constantly bitten is one of constantly rained on. These are all things, you think about war, the main thing is to fight the enemy, but constantly you're fighting the environment. Yes,
yeah. I mean, that's another thing about the Afghan war. Sorry to keep referencing that, but it's my main experience is, over half the casualties were disease and cholera, sunstroke, things, never mind the enemy.
So we're sort of in at the deep end. First we get, obviously the film's called Platoon, so it's about a group of people. A platoon is, I can't remember, I looked it up now, is it 2...
Wait, I know we've got 2 sergeants, which are two of the most interesting characters, and then there's a lieutenant, perhaps I should say lieutenant for Vietnam. Lieutenant.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the film is about the difference between the 2 sergeants. We've got Sergeant Barnes, played by Tom Berenger, who has a scar because he's a street fighter.
Good scar as well, isn't it? I mean, I thought, it's not real, is it?
No. But I remember watching it thinking it was real, because it's so good.
Yeah.
Apparently, they only managed to do the makeup quickly because of a glue developed for the Vietnam War.
Oh, I see.
So that was part of his makeup.
Yeah.
So he is a really hard-bitten... Both of the sergeants are sort of successful soldiers. They know the environment, they know the war, and they are both heroic.
And slightly psychotic.
Yeah. Sergeant Barnes is certainly...
off the scale.
Yes.
He's quite a scary character, isn't he? Because he doesn't seem to have any empathy.
Yes, that's right, yeah. He may very well be a sociopath.
Yeah.
Whereas, opposite that, we've got Willem Defoe's Sergeant Elias, who is much more caring, even though he is also just as capable a soldier.
Yes. I mean, he's also got that cold killer aspect. He's tough, but he does have empathy, very much so.
Yeah, so he's the one who... I think he's not in charge of Charlie Sheen's character.
No.
But he's the one who says, look, I'll take out... Not only does he say, you don't need this in your pack, but he says, I'll carry it for you, which is something, which Sergeant Barnes wouldn't do. He'd probably just throw the stuff away.
Yeah.
Yeah, they originally wanted an American native to play Sergeant Elias.
Oh, right.
Which I think might be because these are characters based on Oliver Stone's own people he knew.
Yeah.
I don't know how much based on that. And so this was a Native American. But they couldn't find an actor to take the role, so they had Willem Defoe.
Right.
Who was at the time known more for playing evil roles, apparently.
Yes. Although this was quite an early film, and a lot of these...
Yes.
I mean, these are young actors, of course,
Yeah.
so it was a film that kickstarted a lot of their careers.
Yeah.
They'd done stuff before, but this was...
Yes.
I mean, Platoon was nominated for 8 Oscars, and it won 4. It won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Sound, and Best Film Editing. And both Berenger and Defoe were nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Yes, you can see why as well.
Yeah, so very good for your career.
Yeah.
I know Charlie Sheen wasn't nominated.
Yeah, well, I suppose he's the sort of bland hero type role, but he's more of the point of view character, so you can't have him too different a character.
No, that's right. No.
Sort of unfortunate for him. Anyway, so we get to see them tramping through the jungle, which is horrible. I mean, and at one point you see them going up a slope and sliding down it, and you just get to know how much weight was in these packs and just what a slog it is.
Yeah.
And then they get to the end of the day and they have to dig a foxhole, and of course the experienced troops just get the newbies to dig.
Yeah.
You know, that hole ain't going to dig itself, they say.
And we've got Charlie Sheen writing letters to his grandmother.
Yes.
There wasn't really much put in this, but there seemed to be some ambivalence towards his parents, or definitely his father.
Yeah.
Because he seems to say, pass on my love to my... Well, sometimes he says mother and father, but there's a little bit more focus on mother. Do you know if that's anything to do with Oliver Stone's background, or is that...
Yeah, no, I'm not really sure about that. I mean, one thing that he says later is that he dropped out of college because he thought he wasn't learning anything.
Yeah.
I think this is true of Oliver Stone too.
Right.
And came to Vietnam. He says because he didn't see why...
This is Charlie Sheen's character saying this.
Yeah. This is a couple of scenes later, but he says he didn't see why it was all the sort of what we'd call the working class characters.
Yeah.
People had to fight the war, you know.
Yeah.
And so he's obviously an idealist in some way, and has sort of dropped out. Well, actually, not dropped out in the traditional way, in the sort of hippie way. He's dropped out of college and run away to join the army.
Yeah, which goes against his fairly privileged upbringing, I guess.
So you can imagine the
so there could be some parental... Yeah, that makes sense, actually.
I mean, Oliver Stone says in his commentary that even though it was a war where anyone was signed up, in practice, middle-class kids and above had a get-out clause where they could say, I'm going to college instead.
Right.
Whereas the less privileged couldn't say that, and so they were shipped out.
Yeah.
And so most of the soldiers were from less privileged backgrounds.
I guess having always been sheltered and special, I just want to be anonymous, like everybody else. Do my share for my country. Live up to what Grandpa did in the First War, and Dad did in the Second. Well, here I am, anonymous, all right, with guys nobody really cares about. They come from the end of the line, most of them. Small towns you never heard of. Pulaski, Tennessee, Brandon, Mississippi, Pork Bend, Utah, Wampum, Pennsylvania. 2 years high school's about it. Maybe if they're lucky, a job waiting for them back in a factory. But most of them got nothing. They're poor. They're the unwanted. Yet they're fighting for our society and our freedom. It's weird, isn't it? At the bottom of the barrel, and they know it. Maybe that's why they call themselves grunts. Because a grunt can take it. Can take anything. They're the best I've ever seen, Grandma. The heart and soul.
There's a scene where Private Gardner, who's a slightly chubbier...
Yes, he's a newbie as well.
It shows Taylor a picture of his girl back home. And as soon as he did that, I thought, oh, you're dead.
Yes.
It's just that he's not going to last long, but they need to get some pathos into his character.
Yeah, so after they dig into the night, they then go out on a patrol, is it? I can't remember.
Right, yeah.
And soon find themselves camping in the jungle. Charlie Sheen's character is given a watch.
Yep.
He's put on watch, rather.
Yes.
He stays awake through it, but then gives the night sight to one of the more experienced soldiers, who promptly just goes to sleep.
Junior.
Yeah.
I think it is, yeah.
Whereupon they're attacked.
Yes.
And this is something Oliver Stone says...
But Junior blames...
Yes.
Afterwards.
And of course he can get away with it, because everyone would blame the newbies for falling asleep. Oliver Stone says this is an experience he had. I think he did fall asleep. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Right.
But he did say that when he saw the Viet Cong soldiers coming towards him, he was completely frozen.
Yes. Which Charlie Sheen just does look... They're just these sort of silhouettes. They're quite scary, actually. In fact, throughout the film, you don't get a clear look of any of the North Vietnamese army soldiers' faces.
Yes.
They're shadows or they're blurs going by. And there's this scary aspect of, the jungle.
Yes.
is I would hate to fight in a jungle. I'd hate to fight anywhere. But a jungle just seems so confusing. And I always had this feeling of when everyone's rushing into the jungle and they're saying, you go this way, we'll do this. I thought, you're just going to see someone come out of a tree and shoot them. And
yeah. Well, there's a scene later on where Charlie Sheen's character is on point, walking along, and the sergeant comes up behind him and says, look, there's a bunker. And it's right in front of him. He said, and there's another thing they say, that you can be walking through a jungle and there can be a Viet Cong soldier right in front of you.
Yeah, and all these tripwires and things. Yes. I mean, you'd have to go at a snail's pace, which you can't, of course, because you've got to keep going. Yeah. Now, in that attack that we were just talking about, that's where Gardner does get killed, doesn't he? So there's the first new guy gone.
And Charlie Sheen's character gets wounded, doesn't he?
Very slightly. I mean, he overreacts, saying, tell me the truth, is it serious?
He thinks he's going to die, but meanwhile, Gardner is dying.
Yeah. Although he does get shipped off to hospital, Charlie Sheen, doesn't he? That's his first wound, so I guess it was more than just a scratch.
Yeah. There's
a couple of phrases in this film that I don't know if they came from this film or they were probably... I guess they were... Well, I guess they were actual Vietnam phrases. So it's lock and load, and tag 'em and bag 'em, which is for the dead, of course.
I would say that was one of the things that sort of put me off Vietnam films. Of war films, I was sort of put off for them a bit.
Yeah.
And Vietnam films in particular, just because there seemed to be this fetishization of all their sort of catchphrases and clicking guns, and all this. I mean,
there's this kind of swagger, but of course the swagger covers up the reality of what you're having to deal with, the fear. In fact, I'm just going to leap ahead to a scene here. Where talking about the fear, there's a bit where they come across a Vietnamese village, and Charlie Sheen gets very aggressive towards one of the villagers who's been hiding, and they've both got fear that the Vietnamese chap is just smiling. And there's a kind of a fear where you can't help but just smile. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that sometimes happens at funerals. There's a strange emotion where you end up smiling even though you don't. I don't know. It's complicated, but I've seen that happen.
Yeah,
and I think it's the same with fear. You just end up almost laughing or smiling. And Charlie Sheen, his fear comes out in aggression. Yeah, but you can see he's scared stiff. So a lot of this aggressive macho posturing, in fact, I think probably all of it, is to hide the underlying fear of everybody. Yeah, no matter what your rank or experience.
I just think that pretty much you were terrified 100% of the time. Yeah. And then suddenly you'd have these bursts of completely confusing violence. I mean, it was. And
that's probably true of Tom Berenger's character as well, actually. I think there's probably a fear there, and he's basically just shut off part of his character to deal with it, part of his psyche to deal with that. And that's the empathy. You don't want empathy because you're going to lose your friends, your colleagues, and you're going to be killing people.
Yeah, you can't be thinking about, my poor soldiers. You've just got to use them as
or even the poor villagers, or even the enemy. You think once you start thinking they've got a family and children at home or something, you can't.
Yeah.
So yes, Charlie Sheen comes back from his hospital stay and is immediately put on the latrine cleaning duty, which looks pretty horrendous.
Yeah, I was surprised that what they actually did is they drag out these huge half oil barrel type things full of human waste and then burn them. They would put petrol on them and then just light them up.
Oh, yeah.
I guess it's one way of doing it, but
yeah.
Now, the crucial part about this section is this is where we see the platoon bonding as people. Yes. They're back at base, so they're not out at the moment. But we see them divided into two groups. Yeah. And apparently this was something that you'd actually find in Vietnam.
The Stoners and the Straights.
Yeah, so the Straights tended to drink. Oliver Stone said he noticed that there was a certain type of people they'd drink rather than take drugs.
Right.
Listen to country music. And he said they were often the tougher, nastier.
Yes.
Maybe not nastier, but they were the more like Sergeant Barnes type character. Yeah. They weren't open and friendly as much.
No.
But they might survive a bit more.
Yeah. I guess it makes sense that perhaps the more liberally minded ones would be the ones who would be the stoners. Yes,
yeah. They're the ones who are listening to the new type of music, like The Doors and Jefferson Airplane.
Yes, in fact we get White Rabbit, which is the cue for, or rather drugs drug taking is the cue for White Rabbit to go on by Jefferson Airplane.
And also things like soul music. Oliver Stone says this is where he heard a lot of music from African Americans.
Yeah.
Whereas the other lot were listening to country music,
which is much more a white Republican.
Yes,
probably using the wrong terms, but
or it could be seen as that in this situation.
Yeah.
So in the Guns of Navarone, you said early on, there's this scene where they become a group. You know, that's where they find the laundry boy outside listening to them. And
yes,
this is the similar situation here. And in fact, did you know there's a cast link between Guns of Navarone and Platoon?
No.
There's a character in the drugs den. There's a bloke sitting on a sort of throne of sandbags.
Yes. I don't know if he's called King or something.
He's Ra.
Ra, that's it.
You later see him. He's got a staff with barbed wire at the end.
Wire.
He is played by Francesco Quinn.
Yes.
Son of Anthony Quinn.
Oh, brilliant! Right. I didn't know that. No.
Yeah. No.
Right. I love these little links. So.
Yeah. So we've got two sons of war film veterans.
Yes, yes.
But you notice how much this, all Vietnam films, of course, use the music because it's so much a part of the times. Yes. And of course, all the people involved, this was their youth. That sort of point where they're growing up, and your tastes are, you're opened up to new tastes and you find what you like. So it must be obviously such a formative period anyway, but to be thrust into such an initiation of
of experience,
where you might not come out alive, or certainly you could come out badly scarred psychologically or physically.
So you've got these two groups, and Charlie Sheen ends up with the stoners, and being introduced to drugs and all that kind of stuff, of which Sergeant Elias, Willem Defoe, is in that camp.
Yes.
Tom Berenger, Sergeant Barnes, is with the Straits.
Yeah.
And they're the Lieutenant Wolf.
Yeah.
He tries to ingratiate. I mean, he comes across throughout the film as kind of inept.
Yeah.
Not really into the war, but he's in charge of the platoon, I guess. And
there's a lieutenant. There's a quote somewhere that says the lieutenant's in charge, but sergeants run the platoon.
Yes, and in fact, there's a scene where Sergeant Barnes gives out the orders quite
unthinkingly.
Yeah, just does it, telling them what to do. And as they walk off, the lieutenant says, "I think in front of the men, I should be giving the orders." But it's clear.
And even then, Sergeant Barnes says, "Do you think?" or whatever. As in. He feels very much like someone who's come from college or from officer training to the war, and he hasn't got the experience that the sergeants have.
He's quite a clean-cut looking, and in the two camps scene, you can see him trying to ingratiate himself with the soldiers, making conversation, but he can't quite do it, can he?
Yeah.
He's not one of them. He's not in either camp.
No.
He ends up surviving, doesn't he? He's another one I thought, he's going to die, but I don't think he gets killed in the film. Yeah,
I mean, it's quite difficult to tell. It was only when I'd watched the film a few times that I noticed certain characters dying.
Yeah.
Like Johnny Depp's character later on gets shot.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you see.
No, I didn't notice that. Yeah.
A lot of them do get wiped out. But this Lieutenant Wolf, I don't think does. So yes, shall we go from there to the next sort of action they see?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's New Year's Day 1968 is the next scene.
They're out in the jungle, and again, Charlie Sheen's on point. And this is where they come across a Viet Cong sort of bunker or hideout.
Yeah.
And it's right in front of Charlie Sheen's character, and he doesn't notice it, but Sergeant Barnes does.
Yes, and this is something I'd heard a lot about, and they are amazing because you get Willem Dafoe goes in, he goes into the dismounts tunnel. All his equipment just with a pistol, and down he goes quite bravely. But these things were amazing, weren't they? They were
warrens
of underground tunnels that went on. They had rooms, they went up and down.
God,
incredible.
Imagine going down one of those, knowing that you'd be surrounded by enemy, and you can't move much.
It's just reminded me of a comic that I read, and I think this is quite a long time ago, but I think this is the story. It's about a man who comes back from Vietnam, and he has dreams that they're tunnelling after him, and I don't know if it actually happens or if it's part of the dream that North Vietnamese soldiers come up through his room in America. They've been tunnelling after him all this time because he was sent down to the tunnels. It's a horror comic, of course.
Yeah. Apparently they would have special people, tunnel rats.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't...
The Americans.
Yeah. Willem Dafoe's character wouldn't necessarily have done what he did, which is dived into the tunnel himself. They'd have got someone, a specialist.
Oh, I see.
But he said quick situation that he might have done there.
I mean, this was actually a camp. There was the tunnel.
Yeah.
But around it there was also a camp. There was washing lines. There was fires, and it's just been very quickly abandoned.
Yeah.
In fact, down in the tunnel, there's still there's a wounded. They've left a wounded man.
Yeah.
And there's another man, which Defoe shoots.
Yeah. And of course, some of the soldiers find a box of plans and maps, and this is obviously extremely valuable. And just when you think, oh yeah, there's obviously important information, picks up the box and it's attached to a bomb.
Of course, yeah, booby-trapped.
Yeah.
And his arms get blown off, don't they? Both of them. That's quite a horrific scene. And one of their group goes missing, Manny, at this point, who was on guard on the perimeter. So they go looking for him, and they find him across a river, strung up.
Oh yes, I didn't notice that. I mean, I knew. Obviously, they find a man strung up. I didn't realise he was part of their platoon.
Yes, yeah, that's Manny, who, because Charlie Sheen was put on, and I think Manny was the other one. They were both
just to
put
watch
on the perimeter to watch out while they're investigating the camp. All they find is a still smoking cigarette on the floor, but it's quite a while before they find him.
Yeah.
And the next thing they do is go on to the nearest village, and now, having seen Manny strung up,
they're all extremely angry.
Yeah, there's a air of revenge.
Yes.
Which is quite dangerous for the villagers.
Now this, to me, is like the archetypal Vietnam War film scene.
Yeah.
It's not a fight against enemy soldiers, but it's in a village where US soldiers who are tested to the max, they don't necessarily have the sort of extremely disciplined command. They're like a bunch of young blokes with guns, and they're on the edge of violence already, and they start killing potential innocents.
I mean, this must have happened in all wars.
Yes.
I mean, we've heard about atrocities in World War One.
Yeah. Especially
from the Germans. You tend not to hear it so much about the Western Allies, although, I mean, maybe it didn't happen as much. I don't know. But it must have also happened in World War Two, especially for the victors, or the ones with the power.
Yes.
Going into places, then you had things like abuse, torture, and killing of civilians, and rape of the women, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So this is a kind of microcosm of that in this little village setting. Yeah. But of course they find weapons.
Yes.
Now the North Vietnamese did hide. The villagers had no choice.
Yes.
If they didn't hide them, because the North Vietnamese tortured and killed their own people, the villagers, and the Americans did the same. There were war crimes on both sides. So these poor villagers get it from both sides.
And it's, of course, extremely difficult for the American soldiers to tell. You know, there's a natural distrust from people who look differently. I mean, I know...
and the language, of course.
Yeah, no one wants to be racist, but it's difficult to... Sometimes it can be difficult to read the expression of someone who looks different from you.
And of course, I mean, humanity is tribal.
Yes.
Whatever level it goes, from the family to your neighbourhood, to your street, to your town, to your county, your football team, your country, your so-called race, and all that kind of stuff. That's how humanity, unfortunately, works.
Yeah.
So, of course, you get these two very different communities come up against each other with no understanding of each other's culture or language.
Yeah.
We do have... This is Johnny Depp's role. He's the translator.
Yes.
He speaks Vietnamese.
Yeah.
But so there's a few atrocities here. We've got... I already mentioned Charlie Sheen. He doesn't actually... he shoots at the feet of...
Now, apparently this is... it's difficult to notice, but apparently this Vietnamese man whose foot he shoots at has got one leg.
Do you know, I didn't see that, because you're right, it's difficult to notice, but I did think, he's hopping.
Yeah. And I think because, he's got one eye slightly shut, it's difficult to tell if he might actually be not all there mentally.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's got his mother there.
Of course, yeah.
So, obviously, Charlie Sheen's character snaps, but it's another slightly more psychotic character called...
Bunny, I think it's Bunny.
Bunny, yes, who then goes in and...
Who's played by Matt Dillon's brother, Kevin Dillon.
Oh, I sort of recognise him. I thought
he's got the Dillon look.
Is he really young? Yeah. And he just kills this Vietnamese with the butt of his rifle.
Yeah, smashes his head in.
And then there's a shot of the woman. I can't tell if she's dead or just in shock.
No, I think she's in shock. Because I didn't see anything happen to her.
And this is obviously a case of someone who's gone over completely onto the dark side, He says, did you see the way his head came apart? Completely objectifying.
Yeah.
This,
laughing.
Yeah.
Which,
again,
it's probably that bit of his character that's cracked.
Yeah.
It's his way of dealing with it.
It's almost like
not that it's an excuse by any means.
It's almost like a video gamer's reaction.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
But
there's another scene where Sergeant Barnes shoots a woman because he won't give her the information he wants.
Yeah.
Never mind whether she knows it or not. The information that he expects to hear, he's not getting. She's panicking and scared, and he just turns around and shoots her.
There's almost a feeling as though he's fed up of listening to her gabble.
Yeah. Well,
and he just wants to shut her up.
Yeah. I mean, these aren't people to him, and probably quite a few in war that happens, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he takes, I think, her daughter and puts a gun to her head.
Yeah, to try and get him to talk.
And that's where Sergeant Elias comes in from whatever he's been doing, sees this, and Barnes and Elias have a bust-up.
Yeah.
Good old fisticuffs. And this shows Elias's character.
Yes.
So he has got the empathy.
Yeah.
So they have this fight, and that is really... I mean, they were already different characters, rubbing up against each other in their different ways. One was in each camp of the Stoners or the Straits or whatever.
Yeah.
But this... Well, of course, Elias says he's going to report him. So that would mean a court-martial, because it is murder. And,
It always seems strange to me that you could have murder in the middle of a war.
Yes.
But of course, as we said in the Guns of Navarone, you've got, when the Germans capture soldiers, they don't shoot them. They say, the war is over.
Yes. There are rules, not by no means always kept to.
Yeah.
But it does.
Yeah. Don't shoot civilians.
Yeah.
Take prisoners rather than just killing soldiers, for instance. It seems odd.
And they have to. I mean, the Geneva Convention side of it, you have to treat them in a certain way as well.
Yes, but then the lieutenant steps in, and rather than he doesn't discipline Sergeant Barnes, he says
because he's scared of him.
Yeah, he says let's torch the village.
Yeah,
which they do. I mean, apparently this was something they had instructions to do. If weapons were found, you treat.
Despite the fact they probably had no choice. And still, and there's another scene where Charlie Sheen. I don't know whether he's inspired by Elias, but I think it's just his true character. He stops the rape of one of the village girls. Yeah,
which shows that even though he snapped earlier shooting at this bloke,
I think that was a moment of
that
was a moment of heightened fear in this village, and I think
apparently both are things that Oliver Stone did. He did actually save someone from being raped.
That was the point in the film where I suddenly thought, God, I feel guilty about enjoying Guns of Navarone as just having a war film of some frivolous entertainment aspect. Obviously, it's fine to have that as well, but it did make me think, God, this is so different in so many ways. So Barnes is under a possible court-martial, and back at the camp, that's discussed. There's a point where Charlie Sheen and Sergeant Elias, and Elias says we're going to lose this war. Which kind of turned out to be true.
Yeah, what happens next? This is something that Oliver Stone said they could never understand when they're actually in the situation. Is you'd go into a situation, clear it out, find information about some other base somewhere, but then you'd be sent back to the place you'd just been, and maybe you'd lost men. And he said we could never understand why we were sent back to the same place.
Right. And
so here I think they get into they're sent back to clear out more Viet Cong bases in the same area.
Just something about the Viet Cong were in South Vietnam, and it was the North Vietnamese army. The Viet Cong were communist underground
resistance.
Yeah, kind of resistance fighters. So they were more the underground terrorist aspect of it.
Oh, so I mean, I did find it difficult to know what to call the enemy. The NVA, they call North Vietnam Alliance or Army.
I presume. I don't know.
But of course, there's a lot of racist slang as well.
Yes.
Used. But, so I didn't want to use that. Well, next we basically get a big assault.
Yes.
This is the one where where Barnes shoots Elias.
Yes. Right. Okay. Yes. So they get ambushed,
That's
there seems to be a sudden change in Charlie Sheen now, because one of the first things he does when the front men on point, I guess, get shot.
That's Johnny Depp.
Ah, right,
yes.
okay. I wondered, I couldn't tell who that was, because I actually thought it was Bunny at first. I thought he's rescued a guy from the other group, but then later he seemed fine. Anyway, so no, that was Johnny Depp. He was so covered in mud.
Yeah, and blood later.
But so Charlie Sheen, Chris Taylor, first thing he does is he's crawling up to the front to try and rescue men straight away.
Yeah, he becomes a lot more heroic.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a bit more carefree.
Yes.
Perhaps he's lost a bit of care about his own life almost.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Decided not.
But it's quite an heroic action.
Yeah.
So he saves. So is it Johnny Depp? That's the one he drags back, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And then, of course, Charlie Sheen's character is taken away by Sergeant Elias to do some sort of action back into the fray.
Yes. So,
but then Elias says
they need three. He needs 3 men.
Yeah.
Because there's some kind of thing. He says, "I've seen this before. We're going to end up shooting each other." So he's got a plan.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Barnes agrees with it. There's a bit of tension between them, but he agrees, and off they go. But then the lieutenant has decided to call in the heavy bombs. So they've got to get out. Yeah. And Barnes goes to find them, and he comes across Elias, who's doing his ninja.
Yes.
He's stripped down again. He's running through the jungle, shooting Vietnamese soldiers.
Yeah.
And then there's a great scene. He comes out of the jungle, and facing him is Barnes. Yes. Elias and Barnes facing. And Elias does this smile.
Yeah.
Now, Willem Defoe's smile is something different from another smile. It's great.
Yeah.
And then his face drops.
Yeah.
Barnes shoots him.
It's a difficult scene to read because it's such an innocent smile.
Yeah.
Yes. Is he thinking, oh, it's not a Vietnamese, it's one of, it's Sergeant Barnes, it's one of my men? Or is he thinking, oh, I know he's not thinking, I know what's going to happen.
My thing was, my first impression was, I'm enjoying the game. We both understand this game.
Yes, yeah.
That's what I got. And then he drops because Barnes doesn't respond. Not that he would ever smile in this film, of course.
Yeah.
And then Barnes shoots him.
Yeah, shoots.
And everyone's withdrawn because the bombs are coming. They get into the helicopters.
Well, crucially, just before this, you say the lieutenant called in bombs, but he misreads the map and actually drops bombs on his own men.
Right.
Which is something Oliver Stone said, that he had him. You see him with a map and a sort of protractor, and these things were notoriously difficult to read. But it's like he's gone back to his college learning, and he's trying to do.
Yes.
Where are we? Oh yeah, I'll get out my ruler, and and he gets it wrong.
Yes.
And he bombs his own men.
Yeah.
But,
which is jumping ahead again. That's actually something they do deliberately towards the end of the film, because it's the only way to get rid of the enemy, because they're completely among them.
And this is a theme all the way through this film. It's not so much about the platoon fighting the enemy. It is about the platoon fighting itself.
Right.
The army fighting itself. And of course, within each individual, we've seen like Charlie Sheen's character go over to the dark side, shooting at, but then swaps back to the good side when he saves this woman from being raped, for instance. Yes. But you sort of got almost like two parent figures. You got Elias and Barnes. As the two ways that Charlie Sheen's character could go as a result of his experience.
Right, yes, yeah.
He could become desensitized and the killer, or he could become, he could become still a hero, but compassionate.
Yes, a greater understanding of him. I mean, at the end of the film, he says, we didn't fight the enemy, we fought ourselves.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, that's why, you, as you said earlier, you don't see the enemy except as a sort of shadowy presence. They're almost like... it's not, the enemy doesn't matter.
It's not about them,
We just dropped a bunch of young people in the jungle with some guns, and they'll end up killing each other.
Lord of the Flies type stuff.
Yeah, that's something I thought of.
Yeah. Now, this is really the scene that I remembered from Platoon.
Yes.
That is very striking. So everyone's in the helicopters, they think Elias is dead, and they look down and they see him running. I mean, this sends a shiver down your spine. Chased by the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese. And they're just little figures, but there's this one lone man, and there's all these other figures.
Yeah.
Of course, he's dead. They've got him. And we get Adagio for strings, which is a theme throughout the musical theme throughout the film, which has been dubbed the saddest music ever. And it is. I mean, I think it was probably the first time I heard that music, or knowingly heard it, was in Platoon. And I remember thinking, wow, that music... And that scene, I mean, the pathos and... My God, it's emotionally charged to the hilt, isn't it? Adagio for Strings, I bought it quite a long time later, but I was driving home from working as a cleaner at a sports club where I used to work, and that came on. And I I was almost in tears just driving home from this music, because I listened to Radio 3, I think, and it came on, and I bought it after that.
Yeah.
I also bought it's by Samuel Barber, I also bought some of his songs. Beautiful piece of music, absolutely amazing. But anyway, it's been used a lot, but used in conjunction with these images is really wouldn't you say it was the most memorable scene of the film? Yes,
definitely. I mean, obviously it provides the scene everyone knows of...
oh, yes. Willem Defoe with
Elias
his
arms up in the air and just being shot.
It's terrible because they're all up in the air in the helicopters. They can't land because of the soldiers down there. He's helpless.
Yeah. And crucially, of course, earlier, Charlie Sheen's character meets Sergeant Barnes, and Sergeant Barnes says, "I found Elias, he's dead."
Yes, of
Charlie
course. Got to say that.
Yeah, Charlie Sheen's character thinks,
because he's looking.
Should I go and get him?
Yeah,
because he's obviously attached to Sergeant Elias at this point.
Yeah,
but then he doesn't, and because then we see Sergeant Elias living, we now know Charlie Sheen knows that Sergeant Barnes killed him.
Yeah,
he probably had an idea before, but
yeah.
And so then we get back at base. We've got the platoon, and it's divided up into stoners and I can't remember what we call the other people. The drinkers.
Straights. Yes. I've been calling them stoners and straights.
And the stoners are discussing what they should do about Sergeant Barnes.
It's prompted by Charlie Sheen saying, let's get him.
They're saying, should we kill him? This is where they point out that Sergeant Barnes has been shot 7 times and he's still not dead.
Yeah, so... does that tell you something? Yeah. And of course, Barnes is just outside.
Barnes is just outside drinking, and so he hears, and he, rather than taking it to a court-martial as he probably could, he decides to settle matters there. Yeah. Turns out he's got a sort of stab knife in his...
Yes.
Well, firstly he says, go on, then kill me, and no one does, because they all know that he's he is such an imposing figure.
Yeah, yeah.
Then Charlie Sheen's character breaks and starts beating his head against a pole.
Yeah.
But
not for long.
This man is such a much more experienced fighter, not just with a gun, but a street fighter type. That he turns on him with this stab knife. He's about to kill him.
Yeah.
And then Francesco Quinn is the character who steps in and says,
"Yes,
you'll go to prison for this."
Don't do it. Yeah, and talks him down.
You smoke this shit so to escape from reality? Yeah, I don't need this shit. I am reality. There's the way it ought to be. There's the way it is. Elias was full of shit. Elias was a crusader. Now, I got no fight with any man that does what he's told. But when he don't, the machine breaks down. And when the machine breaks down, we break down. And I ain't gonna allow that. Many of you. Not one. You all love Elias. You want to kick ass. Yeah. Well, here I am, all by my lonesome. And ain't nobody gonna know. 6 you boys against me. Kill me.
Then we come to this kind of last big scene, don't we? The big fight. And this is a scene where they know, I think this is right, the North Vietnamese army are coming in numbers. And they're preparing, and there's various foxholes they're digging. I mean, it all seems very inadequate. The soldiers complaining that, foxhole there, a foxhole there. The army can just come right through between us. What's it going to do? You've got Junior. Now, I don't know if he was deliberately spraying his feet with sort of bug spray or something, but
apparently,
was he doing it on purpose?
Yeah, apparently, if you mosquito repellent.
Yeah,
this is something I think the military advisor said on his commentary. That would have a certain effect on the skin, and if you did constantly apply it to your feet, they would become really tender.
Right.
And of course, he says at the beginning that this is one thing you've got to really take care of a soldier's feet.
Yes.
It's something he did with the actors. Made sure they had really good boots, and that their feet were always well cared for.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was like, shooting yourself in the foot as a way of getting out of the war.
Right. But then he was threatened by Barnes. I can't remember the threat now, but he had no choice. But to stay. And this is also the one where I think it's Red, the character Red.
He says, I've got leave in 3 days.
Yeah.
I've got a really bad feeling about this.
He asked Barnes to let him go now, which of course he would never do.
Yeah.
There was another character who does get his leave.
Suddenly he's obviously been sent out to this on this mission, but then he's told, oh no, your 365 days is up. And he goes, he says, all you've got to do is make it out of here, all the rest is gravy. As in, the rest of his life, every day will be a free day.
Right, yes.
Because he's made it out of this horrible place.
Yeah, that must be an amazing feeling, actually. Yeah. I did think at that point in the film, I thought, he's so happy his helicopter's probably going to get shot down or something.
Yes.
But no, he happily made it out.
Yeah. So, Charlie Sheen's character gets down into a foxhole with... Now, this is a character I don't think he's really introduced before, but the actor he's with is in fact the lead singer for Living Colour.
Really?
Rock group, yes.
That's amazing. That's a great fact. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Living later.
Yes,
yeah. He was, right,
I think that was sort of like the end of the 80s, the 90s.
Oh, fantastic.
They got together.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, they're told to sit in there and wait for the enemy to come along.
Yeah.
And this is also, we get to see Oliver Stone on screen.
Oh, yes, as commander.
Yes, I think that's actually during the attack, isn't it?
Yeah.
He gets killed when a Vietnamese suicide bomber runs
in. Which I guess must have happened.
Yeah.
And I presume he knew exactly... He was going for the high command of the operation there, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah.
He thought, the director's in there, I'm going to get him.
So basically all hell breaks loose, doesn't it?
Yes, it's a night attack.
Yeah.
Just to add to the chaos and all the coming. And Chris Taylor, Charlie Sheen, again, kind of proves himself. This would be surely some medal of valour for what he does. He gets drags his partner out the foxhole because he realises they're about to fire a rocket launcher at it.
Yeah.
And then as they run back, he's shooting. Oh, before that, he has the presence of mind to charge the is it the claymores?
Oh yeah. There's some sort of
the bombs. Obviously, you have to do 3 hits of it to detonate it. So that does good. And then he's shooting. He's back in the foxhole. I mean, he basically saves his foxhole partner, the Living Colour.
Yeah.
So, Living Colour wouldn't have happened otherwise. And, some quite good heroics from him. Adversely, from the Straits, we get Red hides himself under a dead body.
Yes, yeah.
And he does actually survive.
Yeah.
And although, just skipping ahead, at the end, he wants to go home, but he's told no, he's on another patrol out into the enemy.
Yes.
So we don't know.
He's got such a great expression for the person who thinks that he's just on the verge of being let home, but is not being allowed to. It's utter... comical despair.
That's John McGinley, I think.
Oh, is it? Right, yeah.
A lot of these actors were also in Born on the 4th of July. So he was Mark Moses, who was Lieutenant Wolf. Forrest Whitaker was in Good Morning Vietnam. Charlie Sheen was considered for the lead of Born on the 4th of July.
Right.
Born on the 4th of July. But it went to Tom Cruise, of course. Willem Defoe and Tom Berenger were both in Born on the 4th of July as well.
Yeah.
So absolute chaos.
This is where the captain calls an attack on his own perimeter.
Yes, intentionally.
Yes.
The captain being Captain Harris Dale Dye, who's the guy we've
military
already talked
advisor.
about, military advisor. Because they're inundated with the enemy. They've got into the camp. There's just a big mix, and he sees there's no choice.
Yeah.
Come and bomb us. It's the only way to do it. So of course.
Amazing step to take.
Yeah. And there's this scene where Tom Berenger is, I presume, about to kill Charlie Sheen.
Yes.
Is
he just battle crazed, or does he know that Charlie Sheen? Well, obviously he knows Charlie Sheen suspects he killed.
Yeah, so there's this chance to get rid of him. So I presume he's going to kill him.
Yeah.
And then this jet comes overhead, and his eye goes red.
Yeah.
From the laser sight, or no, it can't be. Just from the light.
Blast of napalm or whatever.
Well, no, it's not napalm, but anyway, bomb lands.
Yeah.
And then in the morning.
Yes.
Charlie Sheen is wandering around, He
wakes up realising
rather
the attack
barbecued.
is over. Yeah. Yes.
And he spots Berenger crawling, and Berenger says,
get a medic.
Yeah. And then he sees that he's not going to. He says, okay, do it.
Yeah.
Do it. And he does.
Yeah.
Charlie Sheen shoots him. I think he should have made sure he's dead after the Elias. He didn't really.
Yes.
Because he says, oh, he's dead.
Yeah.
But he didn't go over and check.
It is quite a shocking moment, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is.
At that point, I really didn't know what he was going to do, even though...
I mean, if you think back to the beginning of the film when he steps off the plane all fresh-faced, and then you juxtapose that moment with the one where he ends up killing his own sergeant.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a journey, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
There's a bit in the morning where you just see a deer.
Yes.
There's this sudden slight moment of after all that carnage, and there's a deer.
Yeah. funny thing, in the commentary from Captain Harris, Dale Dye, he said the most difficult fight he ever had was with that deer.
Oh, really?
Trying to keep it standing still. He said obviously he's been in wars, he said, but this thing just kicked and struggled, but it looks quite placid in the film.
There's another moment in the aftermath of that battle where Charlie Sheen's foxhole partner, I think it's Francis, actually his name, he realises he's survived, and obviously thinks, I'm not going to do this again, and just stabs himself in the leg.
Yes, yeah.
There's another harrowing scene in the aftermath where there's a bulldozer, just bulldozing bodies into the... the last time I saw footage like that was at Camp Belsen or something, and the concentration camps of the Nazis. It's pretty shocking. But again, I mean, you can trust everything in this film is something that is from Oliver Stone's experience.
Apparently, they did have a policy of never leaving a body.
Right. I mean, maybe that was just I can't remember if it was just Vietnamese bodies.
Yeah, but I mean, for instance, Sergeant Elias even when he was killed, they would have tried to get his body. Obviously,
even today, there's a repatriation project. They're still finding bodies in Vietnam and even World War II. There is a project to find these soldiers and bring them back. But it doesn't. The British don't do that. I don't think. I don't know if policies change, but they certainly. There's graveyards, certainly from the 19th century. Graveyards all over the world of British soldiers, wherever we've been.
So next, really, we see Charlie Sheen going out on a stretcher.
Yes.
And his
with
friend.
A smile on his face.
Yeah.
He's out.
Bit of a shocked smile.
Because it's his second.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's where he says, "You've been wounded twice." Yeah. That's it for us.
Yeah. And and his little smile for his partner who stabbed himself.
Yeah.
He's off as well.
Yeah. One thing Oliver Stone said in his commentary is when he got back from the war, later on he'd look at histories of because that final fight was based on an actual event,
right?
Where they were faced by huge numbers of Vietnamese. He said he went through histories of Vietnam and he found it wasn't mentioned. This last fight, which he assumed had been a major part of, it was just not part of the histories of the Vietnamese War.
Yeah.
It shows that you could have been in a major combat, or certainly a terrible combat, and it wasn't necessarily a key one.
Yeah. Well, I think we've come to the end of the plot, and I think we've said quite a lot about the film there. Did you enjoy the film, or? Yeah,
I must say, the first time watching it, I didn't remember anything about it, so I sat down and watched it.
So, sorry, I was going to say, you had seen it before?
I think I had, but a long time ago.
Yeah.
Enough that I couldn't remember what happened.
Right.
And at first I thought, well, where's this going? There doesn't seem to be a story. It's basically just his experience.
Yeah.
And the story only really kicks in, when you get the Sergeant Barnes, Sergeant Elias thing in the middle. Right? So at first I was a bit unsure, but now looking back on it, I think it's a really good film.
Yeah, I agree. I'd seen it once before, a long time ago. As I said, I really included this because we needed a Vietnam film.
Yeah.
I didn't choose Full Metal Jacket because we already had a Stanley Kubrick. And perhaps because I was slightly more unfamiliar with this, I think I'd probably seen Full Metal Jacket a couple of times. And my appreciation for this film has definitely grown and kind of earned its place on a favourites list. I think it appears on a lot of films. Like I think Channel 4 said something like, I can't remember the number, it's the 6th or the 9th best war film ever.
Yeah.
I think it was the 6th. And Roger Ebert said it's the 9th best film of the 1980s. Something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a highly respected film, and even today it's very good, definitely. So yeah, very much enjoyed it.
And such a contrast to Guns of Navarone, which is all the heroic vision and on a mission, a specific mission.
Yeah.
This is much more a personal experience of what a soldier would have gone through.
Yes.
Hey. So what's the next film we're covering?
I can't remember.
The look of fear in your eyes.
I was thinking about whether to look or not. So the next one we're doing is the Stanley Kubrick film, Paths of Glory. So that will be interesting. We're going back to the First World War for this. In fact, I think it's the only First World War film we've got. So that will be very interesting.
Yes.
So thank you for listening to our podcast about Oliver Stone's Platoon. Yeah. Please leave comments on the blog or let us know what you thought on Twitter. There'll be links on our blog. And see you for the next War Films podcast.
Yeah. Bye.